Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend. I'm Jason Godbey, here with a recap of some of our No Rest for the Fest coverage of the Tribeca Film Festival. Today, we'll take you to the red carpet for the premiere of the new psychological horror feature, Somewhere Quiet, and later, we'll sit down with the director of the new documentary, Chasing Amy, and take you to the red carpet for that premiere. But first, we got some bills to pay with some lovely ad reads from our very own Emmeline Pryor.
No Rest for the Weekend's coverage of the Tribeca Film Festival is sponsored by New York Women in Film and Television. NYWIFT congratulates its 15 members with films at Tribeca 2023. nywift.org. Black Magic Design, the world's highest quality products for the feature film, post and broadcast industries. blackmagicdesign.com. JMR Rentals, professional, digital, cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. jmrny.com. And by the Tonkawa Film Festival, celebrating short films from around the world. Submissions are open, and now use the promo code NRFTW to receive 50% off your first submission. Submit today. Visit tonkawafilmfestival.com.
The 2023 Tribeca Film Festival kicked off on June 7th, despite New York City being covered in a cloud of Canadian wildfire smoke, giving the city the worst air quality in the country. The festival began with a pre-reception honoring Robert De Niro, where he was given the key to the city by New York City's mayor, Eric Adams. Following the ceremony, De Niro received a surprise speech from Martin Scorsese, congratulating him on his commitment to Tribeca, New York, and the festival. The reception was followed by the opening night screening of Kiss the Future, the highly anticipated documentary featuring U2's journey to perform a long-promised concert for the people of Sarajevo. Producer Matt Damon attended the event, along with Brendan Fraser, Jennifer Esposito, Adam Goldberg, and Tribeca Film Festival co-founder Jane Rosenthal. On June 8th, Somewhere Quiet premiered at the festival, where we spoke with director Olivia West Lloyd and actors Marin, Ireland, and Jennifer Kim on the red carpet. First of all, how does it feel to be at Tribeca with this film?
It feels amazing. It's a real honor to be here with so many filmmakers that I respect and whose work I admire, and we're so delighted to be able to premiere to a New York audience.
Can you tell us a little bit about the film, what happens in it, etc.?
The film is Somewhere Quiet, and it imagines what might happen to a final girl after sort of the end of a horror movie. You know, she goes home, she washes the blood off of her, and sort of what happens next. I was really curious about that experience, especially sort of, you know, after the news has moved on, after, you know, people have started to move back into their regular lives. How does this person re-enter the mundane after such a sort of extraordinary experience?
Would you call this film a horror film?
I would certainly call it a horror film. I think it's a different type of horror. You know, it's sort of a post-horror. It's what happens after the horror film. But, you know, what we discover is that the horror hasn't really ended, but rather changed shape. It's become sort of a horror that emerges from her own subconscious.
There's so many like indie horror films out now. What would you say distinguishes this one from the rest?
Well, I mean, you know, I'm a horror fan, and I think there's so much good out there to see right now. I think, you know, if there's one thing, I would say it's the performances of our cast. I think they're really, really special, really brilliant, and I think that's really the reason to go see it.
What makes a great horror movie, in your opinion?
Oh, man. I think there's so many different ways to make a horror movie. Some of my favorite films are across the spectrum in terms of how they approach horror. I think it's an overall sense of dread that really connects with me, you know, like a sort of moment to moment, this feeling that something is not right, something is wrong here. And I think that's what we tried to imbue this film with.
Do you have a feeling of how it might impact people? Are you just out to scare the pants off of people, or do you want to like move them?
I hope to do a little bit of both.
And talk to me about your lead actor and your relationship with her.
Yeah, Jennifer Kim leads our little ensemble, and she's just spectacular. We had a really wonderful collaboration through this project. I think people are going to be really blown away by her performance.
First of all, how does it feel red carpet, Tribeca?
You know, I live in New York, so being in New York for a movie and for a film festival at Tribeca, it's a dream. You hear about it, it's like being in your hometown once you've lived here for a while. It's the best. New York is the best city on earth.
Can you tell us about your character and kind of what drew you to the project?
In some ways, I guess you could say I'm the villain of this movie. And I don't always get to play parts like this. I don't want to give anything away, but I definitely feel like there's a lot of elements to this character that I got to there was a sort of a supernatural element to my character that was pretty fun to play around with. And honestly, the people involved are the greatest, the best producers I've ever worked with. So it was hard to say no to.
So a director mentioned this is kind of like the final girl after the horror movie. So are you a flashback character, or are you happening to her now?
I mean, without giving things away, I think that a lot of what what Olivia was working with here was sort of the PTSD mindset, and what that does once you've been through something difficult is that trauma repeats itself, and trauma is a cycle, and it's inside of ourselves. So my character brings out a lot of stuff that's buried deep inside of our final girl. And I think that my character, we see her through our final girl's eyes. So some of the stuff that I do or say may or may not be through a certain filter. So that's sort of how I bring out a lot of stuff, a lot of fear and paranoia. That's what I sort of trigger stuff for her without using that word too lightly.
How do you feel like this film will impact the audience? What are you going for?
No, I think this movie is much more of a psychological thriller, and I think it's a lot about, we see a lot of movies that are where scary things happen to people, but not a lot of movies about what happens afterwards. And I think we're living in a time where we all feel like this sort of never-ending cycle, I think, of really scary stuff happening. I mean, we're in New York right now, and it's hard to breathe right now, and I know it's bringing up a lot of stuff for me about masks and scary stuff, and I think to look at what trauma continues to do to us even after we've been through one scary thing, and now it doesn't just go away when that moment's over. And so I think that's something that I appreciate about what she's doing here, is like inviting us in to think about that in a safe environment, as it were.
Horror always has a fan base. How do you feel like the fan base will embrace or this movie? Will it throw them for a loop?
Well, my hope would be that because it's so unique, because I think what people always want more than anything is to be surprised in some way, and especially people who are fans of horror, right? That's like famously, you want a jump scare. And I think that the surprise of this movie and the way it sort of reinvents that genre in its own way, I'm hoping that that's what excites people about it and gives them a thrill.
Jennifer, red carpet, Tribeca, you've arrived. How does it feel?
It feels great to be here. I mean, it's so nice to be able to celebrate with everybody that you've worked with for so long, that you loved, and just had such an intense, beautiful time. Finally get to see it and be together, and in a way that's not very, because this movie's pretty dark, so we can be in a light headspace is really special.
Have you seen the movie yet?
I have seen the movie, but I just saw it at home, like on my little laptop, like in pieces, because it's really hard for me to watch myself, but I loved everybody so much that I really wanted to see their work, and so I made myself watch it, and very proud of Olivia and Marin and Tucker, Michael. Everyone is just amazing.
How do you think it'll be seeing it with an audience? How do you think the audience will react to it?
I'm actually not going to watch it tonight. Marin and I are going to go to her place and just like...
You're chickening out?
We're chickening out. But I hope that everyone enjoys it. I think it'll be a good experience, hopefully, for people to watch in a theater. Maybe I'm second guessing not watching it now, but I think that's for the best. So I don't have like a breakdown.
Are you one of those actors that doesn't like to watch?
It's very difficult to watch, so.
We were talking earlier about the fan base for horror and this type of genre. What kind of effect do you feel it'll have? What kind of effect do you want it to have?
I hope that it'll make people think, because I feel like there's the horror genre, which is like, the final girl, but this takes what happens to the final girl after the horror movie is done, and it asks that question when the girl goes home and has no safety net or comfortable person to unpack everything that happened to her, like what could happen. And so I think that's pretty exciting. I don't know that has been investigated as deeply as just in horror movies. It's the second chapter that people don't people don't really analyze yet. So
It's a little bit of a meditation on trauma and what happens after trauma. You went through this, and you kind of, I guess you start out traumatized for this one. What does that do to you as a performer, and how do you do you shake it off at the end of the night? Are you one of those I'm going to be in character all the time people? Like, how do you manage?
well, you just do all the work and then you let it go when you get to set, and like hope that all the foundation that you've built is there for you and available, because I feel like you can get in the zone, and like it can be very dark and very scary, and the producers were very supportive. Like, if you need therapy, if you need anything, like, we know this is really dark, we want to be there for you. And surprisingly, I was able to jump in and out of it pretty easily. I think that maybe my training finally came to some use, and everyone was just so lovely, so it wasn't too hard to go in and out of it. But at the same time, having watched the movie, of course, I'm like, well, maybe if I went full method and like went Jeremy Strong and like lived separately, never talked to anyone, like my performance would be much better. Like, maybe I should have done that. So that's kind of in the back of my mind, but I don't know.
Or maybe you'd need counseling,
Or maybe everyone would just hate me. So
What was the hardest thing for you to have to go through?
literally every scene in this movie is really difficult. Like, this was a shoot where before each scene I'd have a freak out being like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And then I would somehow do it. And so I can't even believe that it happened. So I can't pinpoint one exact scene, but just the whole process of getting into her headspace, fleshing out the history of all the trauma of her past, her childhood, like even before the kidnapping, like it's that in itself, just really getting into the headspace was difficult. I read this memoir and of a woman who was kidnapped, and I literally read it in one sitting. I stood up and I brought the book and put it in my trash can outside my house, because I was like, okay, I got what I needed from that. I do not want this in my house. Like, so just really coming to terms with the specificity of the dark material.
You had your own exorcism, it sounds like.
Yes.
And we've seen these like great performances in horror, films like Hereditary and Midsommar and stuff. Do you think that things like the Oscars and do you think they'll ever come around to genre acting?
With awards shows, it's like it's all kind of this whole train that's set up to get there, and if you're not on that train from the start, it's just, you kind of know that there's no chance. So that's not the goal for any of us making any art, because then you'll just be really unhappy, I think. But I mean, hopefully at some point it'll just be about the performance or the directing, and it's not about the marketing and all the promotion and how you spin things and like the story that like catches and like everyone jumps on board. So
of course, now we're in the middle of the writer's strike. Where are you now in terms of like next projects?
Well, I have a movie coming up called The Kill Room with Uma Thurman and Samuel L. Jackson, and so people can be looking out for that. But other than that, it's been pretty slow. Like right now, it's been pretty dead because of the strikes. But with the strike, then everything's kind of tentative and like on hold for the summer. So hopefully something great will come.
Turning now to a documentary that explores a fan's relationship with a movie. Director Sav Rogers first saw the Kevin Smith cult classic Chasing Amy at 12 years old. As a queer kid growing up in Kansas trying to find his true identity, he says the film saved his life. I sat down with the director the day before the film's premiere at Tribeca.
I started making movies all because I saw Chasing Amy at 12 years old. I was a closeted queer trans kid in Kansas, and growing up in the suburbs, I thought life was pretty boring. And so movies were kind of my gateway to a more imagined life that was really fulfilling. Chasing Amy was the movie that made me feel seen, understood, and was a life raft when I really needed it in poor circumstances in my hometown. I started filmmaking because I just wanted to tell stories, and I thought movies were going to be the best vehicle for that. And so eventually I went to film school at the University of Kansas, and after my time at the University of Kansas, I started ideating on, okay, what was a movie that only I could make? And my very specific story with Chasing Amy and its life-saving impact on my life, that was the movie that just completely shifted everything, for me in terms of possibility models, in terms of a life that I could imagine more fully, and again, a life-saving impact when I was having a hard time dealing with a lot of the homophobia that I grew up with. Chasing Amy really started, with a lot of audacity. I had no connections to anybody who made Chasing Amy when I was, younger, or when I started the project. But, I was thinking about what does a movie look like that really explores, the LGBTQ community's relationship to Chasing Amy. What does that really look like? What does that mean? Out of nowhere, I got a Facebook ad for this thing called the TED Residency, which I ignored several times, but then ended up applying on the day of the deadline. The TED Residency is a program that was a 3-month idea incubator where I would do research on a project for 3 months and then give a TED Talk. After I applied, I didn't expect to ever hear back, but it turns out I was a finalist. They asked me to pitch my idea for a TED Talk during a great interview process that we had, and I just told them about my idea for a documentary about Chasing Amy. They responded in the best way, which is that it's the most narrow, specific idea for a TED Talk we've ever heard. We'll let you know in 2 weeks. 3 days later, I found out that I got it. And then a couple months later, I moved to New York, left Kansas really for the first time in my life, living somewhere else. I participated in the program. I gave the TED Talk, and the TED Talk was able to kind of get the attention of a lot of people, including, people who were willing to introduce me to Joey, but then also Kevin, because when the TED Talk came out, enough people had sent it to him within an hour of it being online that he just immediately responded. And kind of the rest was history. Chasing Amy is basically a rom-com written and directed by Kevin Smith, starring Ben Affleck and Joey Lauren Adams. The premise of the movie is that a straight man falls in love with a self-identified lesbian, and the movie really covers their ensuing romantic friendship, relationship, and ultimately how they fall apart. It is a super honest film that really resonated with me as a kid. I think Chasing Amy has a really nuanced reputation. Some of it is controversial. Some of it is considered to be like a very honest movie about love and relationships. There's a lot to explore there, which is why I was interested in making the documentary in the first place. I thought that was going to be a really compelling narrative to be able to explore, one community's relationship to a specific film, and then to be able to explore what does good representation look like? What does bad representation look like? That's not the movie that we ended up making. We ended up making a much more personal film about my relationship to Chasing Amy, because I had the good sense to listen to the brilliant collaborators I had around me, including our producers, Alex, Carrie, Matthew, Leela, and we had amazing, just people talking me through the process and the whole way so that I could make the most authentic version of this film. Because my specific relationship to Chasing Amy and how it saved my life as a kid, that was the hook for the TED Talk. And, it's kind of the place that we started at for the documentary. A lot of people don't consider it to be a queer film. I don't really know if you can call it a queer film. Some people do, some people don't. Some people, who are LGBTQ get a lot out of the movie, and some don't. There are also straight people and cisgender people who don't get a lot out of the movie. It's a very complicated movie, but at the end of the day, there was something about my story that, and my relationship to it that I wanted to explore in the process of the documentary, and I'm happy with where it ended up. You can ask any single person who worked on Chasing Amy. I did not want to be the primary participant in it. And it was a super vulnerable place for me to go to. But then I also had to kind of weigh, with my director brain versus the person that I am, okay, how much do I want to reveal? How much do I want to talk about myself? How, does this feel self-aggrandizing in any way? And so that was a constant balancing act for me as, the filmmaker, but also as the primary participant in it. Because, I didn't set out to be in the movie. I set out to tell a very specific story. But like I say in the movie, it's not the movie I set out to make, but it's the movie that we have. And so undoubtedly the toughest part for me was watching cuts of the movie. Because again, it's a vulnerable position to be in when you are the director, and you're also the participant who didn't sign up to necessarily be the participant. And so, I transition in the film. I come out as a trans guy. And for that, it was very hard for me to watch a version of myself that I wouldn't necessarily have chosen to preserve on film, right? That was really challenging. And so it's a vulnerable space to be in. And, it was pretty emotionally draining, to watch myself come of age over and over and over again as we're editing the movie. My producer, Alex Schmitter, always says that, growing pains hurt. And this was a pretty continuous growing pain all throughout the post-production process. Now that we're on the other side of it and starting to talk about, the finished film, I'm now thinking about what does it look like, for a kid in my position to see a movie like this, and I sincerely hope that it has the positive impact that Chasing Amy had on me. That would be the most affirming thing for me as a storyteller, the idea that somebody got something out of it the way that I got something out of Chasing Amy. That would just mean the world to me. Getting into Tribeca was incredible. I could get emotional thinking about it. You work so long and so hard on a project, and you're working with a ton of people, right, who've all put their guts into this, to help me, right? And to get that email saying, hey, you're in, we loved your movie, just meant everything to me, because it's, 4.5 years at the time, like 4 years of just working on it and working on it and working on it and trying to make sure that it's the best version of the story that we could put out there. Endless revisions, endless cuts, a lot of late nights, a lot of long shoot days. And the idea that an institution like Tribeca, let alone the Tribeca Festival, wanted to premiere our movie was just the highest compliment in the world. And I'll never be able to thank the programmers and the staff here enough for the kindness they have imbued onto our team for that. So I couldn't be more thrilled.
And now we'll take you to the red carpet of the world premiere of Chasing Amy, where I caught up with Sav Rogers and his wife Riley. I'm here with Sav Rogers, the director of Chasing Amy. What does it feel like to actually be here, red carpet of Tribeca?
This is surreal. Not in a million years did I imagine all of this. I didn't know, I had no idea what to expect, so I'm just really stoked to be here to share the movie with people.
For you, what are you expecting tonight? We talked about you seeing it with an audience for the first time. What, butterflies, nervous? How do you feel?
I am an anxious wreck who's really excited for what's going to come next, because once the first screening is done, that'll be the scariest part.
Where can people find out about the film if they want to find it online?
If you want to find more information on the movie online, you go to chasingamydoc.com or follow us on social media at chasingamydoc. Thank you so much.
Riley, red carpet of Tribeca for the premiere. How does it feel?
It feels like a dream. I had never. It's a movie that's been 4 years in the making, if anything, and it started from like a dream, a project that my husband had, and he has just put everything he had into it, and with all of his persistence and everything, managed to bring it into like such a big thing. So it's still like crashing into me, the fact that we're here.
Was there ever a time that you didn't think maybe it was gonna get finished?
I did think we were going to finish it. I did think in terms of like the technical parts of it, I thought it was going to be finished. I just really didn't know when, because it kept changing, so I didn't really know when exactly it was going to end.
What is it like being pulled into this subject matter? Can you talk about your feelings through that process?
I did not intend to be on camera. It was just something that happened because our love story ended up being like a very similar and evolving very parallel to what happens in the movie Chasing Amy, so it just like had to happen along with transition things and just both of our lives, because we met each other very young, so everything just like incredibly, it was very magical to be able to capture that on film.
What do you hope the impact will be for the audience tonight?
Well, very personally, I just hope that this movie can let people know that there is just like no one definition of love, that you make your own definition of what love is, and it doesn't matter if people want to define it one way or another. Like, you love somebody in the way that you can and you want, and you do what works for you and your partner, and nothing else matters.
And that's all we have for you today. Thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including our film festival coverage, visit our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, youtube.com/getbehindtherabbit. I'd like to thank everyone who came out to chat with us, and of course, a big shout out and thanks to our sponsors, New York Women in Film and Television, Black Magic Design, JMR Rentals, and the Takawa Film Festival. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.